Just stop it. You can't marry her while I'm still here, John. There's something you haven't told her yet, something you've been hiding. Before you say, I do, there's something everyone should know. John stood at the altar, his face torn, trying to steady his nerves. The guests, dressed in colorful attire, smiled and whispered among themselves, waiting for the ceremony to begin. The church was beautiful, with flowers lining the aisle. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of John's life. He was marrying Mercy, the woman he had fallen in love with a few years ago. Everything had been planned down to the smallest detail. His mother, Mrs. Veronica, had been so excited about the wedding and had always approved of Mercy, seeing her as the perfect wife for John. But as John stood there, something felt off. There was a strange feeling in his stomach that he couldn't shake. Was it just nerves, or was something else wrong? Just as the priest was about to start the vows, John heard a loud commotion from the back of the crowd. The guests started turning their heads, whispering and gasping. John's heart began to race as he looked back to see what was happening. A woman in a gray dress stumbled into the church, looking frantic. Before anyone could react, she fell to the ground. With a loud voice, she spread her legs wide apart to grab everyone's full attention. The crowd was stunned. It was Amaka. Amaka was crashing John's world in the most dramatic way possible. No one had ever seen her like this. Her gray dress stood out against the colorful guests, their whispers filling the air as she slowly lifted herself up. All eyes were on her. She was out of breath, her face pale, but her eyes showed something else, determination. John's heart pounded as he stared at her. This couldn't be happening. Not today. Amaka, what are you doing? John whispered, his voice tight with panic. He glanced at Mercy, who stood frozen beside him, confusion and fear in her eyes. Amaka got to her feet, her voice trembling but loud enough for everyone to hear. I'm sorry, John, she said, shaking her head. But I can't let you do this. The crowd fell silent. Even the guests seemed to calm down, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Mercy looked at John, her voice shaky. John, what is going on here? Before John could answer, Amaka turned towards the guests, addressing them directly. I am Amaka. John and I were together for 10 years. We were in love. We were supposed to get married once, but it didn't happen. John's heart sank. What was Amaka doing? He hadn't spoken to her in years, and now she was here, threatening to destroy everything. I wasn't supposed to come here today, Amaka continued, her voice now steady. But you all need to know the truth. John, this man here, was going to marry me. We were engaged. And he didn't just leave me for Mercy. There's something else he's been hiding from everyone, something even Mercy doesn't know. Mercy took a deep breath, her hands trembling. John, what is she talking about? John's mouth went dry. He tried to speak, but no words came out. Amaka turned back to him, her eyes full of pain. You never told her, did you? John's stomach twisted. He knew exactly what Amaka was talking about. He had hoped that this particular secret would stay buried, that he could start fresh with Mercy without ever having to revisit the past. But now, everything was coming undone. Amaka, don't do this, John pleaded. Amaka shook her head. You don't get to decide anymore, John. The truth has to come out, and it has to come out today. She took a deep breath before dropping the bombshell. Mercy, John and I had a child. The crowd gasped. Mercy's face went white as she stared at John, disbelief written all over her. A child, she whispered, her voice barely audible. John felt like the ground had fallen from under him. He had hidden this from Mercy, and from everyone. Years ago, when John and Amaka were together, they had a child, a baby girl. But their relationship had been rocky, and after they broke up, Amaka took the child and disappeared. John had tried to find them, but Amaka made it clear that she didn't want him in their daughter's life. He had never told Mercy. He thought it was all in the past, but now, with Amaka standing before him, he realized he had been wrong to think it would stay hidden forever. Mercy's eyes filled with tears as she looked at John. "You had a child, John, and you never told me." John felt his throat tighten. "Mercy, I wanted to tell you, but it was complicated. Amaka took her away, and I thought it was over." Amaka let out a bitter laugh. "You think our daughter just disappeared, John? She's still alive, and she deserves to know her father. You've spent all this time pretending like we didn't exist, but you can't run from this anymore." Mercy's tears fell freely now, her hands shaking as she backed away from John. "You lied to me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I trusted you, and you lied to me." John tried to reach out for her, but she pulled away. "Mercy, please, I was going to tell you. I just didn't know how to say it. You've been hiding a whole human being, a whole child, from me, John. How could you keep something like that from me? How could you let me stand here today thinking I knew everything about you?" Amaka crossed her arms, glaring at John. "She deserved to know everything, John. Not just about our daughter. Tell her, John. Tell her the real reason we broke up." John's heart raced. "Not this. Anything but this." "Shut up, Amaka." Amaka took a step closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "It wasn't just because we were young and things didn't work out, was it, John?" John looked between them, Mercy's face full of confusion. "What is she talking about? Please, what's going on here?" Amaka's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Mercy. "John and I were together for years, but things fell apart when I found out he was seeing someone else. He was cheating on me, Mercy. He didn't leave me because he fell out of love. He left because he had someone else." Mercy's eyes widened in shock. "Is that true, John?" John's chest tightened. He felt like he couldn't breathe anymore. The truth was out, and there was no way to stop it now. He had made mistakes, and those mistakes had led him to this moment, on the brink of losing everything. "Yes," John admitted quietly. "It's true. I cheated on Amaka. That's why we broke up." Mercy let out a soft sob, her hand covering her face. "How could you, John?" Amaka stepped forward, her voice trembling with anger. "You ruined everything, John. I loved you, remember? And you destroyed me. You cheated on me and then walked away like none of it mattered. And now you're doing the same thing with Mercy." Mercy stood there trembling, trying to process everything that had just been revealed. John, too, was frozen, guilt consuming him. He looked at Amaka, then back at Mercy. His entire world was falling apart right in front of him, and he had no one to blame but himself. "Mercy," John said softly, his voice full of desperation. "I'm sorry. I made mistakes, yes, I know. But I love you. I want to be with you for the rest of my life." Mercy's face was full of pain as she looked at him. "How can I ever trust you again, John? How do I know you won't lie to me again? How do I know you won't betray me like you betrayed Amaka?" John's heart shattered. "I won't betray you, Mercy. I've learned from my mistakes. I was young and stupid back then, but I'm not that person anymore. I want to spend my life with you." Amaka's voice cut through the air. "You think you can just walk away from this, John? You think you can have your happy ending while our daughter grows up without her father? You owe her. You owe me." Mercy looked between John and Amaka, torn between the man she loved and the betrayal she had just uncovered. The wedding had been perfect, until it wasn't. Now everything was crumbling. Just when it seemed like the decision was clear, an unexpected twist unfolded. Amaka reached into her bag and pulled out a document, waving it in the air for everyone to see. "John, you think you can just walk away from us? This is a custody agreement. I'm suing for full custody of our daughter, and I'm not going to let you walk away this time. John's world stopped. Custody. He had never been involved in his daughter's life, but now Amaka was forcing him into a legal battle that could destroy everything. His mind raced as he realized that Amaka wasn't just there to ruin the wedding, she wanted revenge. Mercy's face went pale as she looked at John. "You didn't even fight for your daughter, did you?" she asked, her voice shaking. John shook his head, feeling his world unravel even further. "Mercy, I didn't know. I didn't know how to fix it. I thought it was better this way." Mercy shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You can't run from your responsibilities, John. You can't lie to me, to Amaka, or to yourself anymore." In the end, John was left with an impossible choice. Amaka had exposed everything, the lies, the betrayal, and now, there was a looming legal battle for their daughter. Mercy stood before him, broken, unsure if she could ever trust him again. "I can't marry you," Mercy whispered, her voice breaking. "Not like this. Not with all these lies between us. I gave you everything. I trusted you, John." John's heart shattered as he realized what he had lost. He had hurt the two women he had loved the most, and now he was paying the price. Mercy turned and walked away, leaving John standing alone at the altar. The guests were silent, stunned by everything they had witnessed. Amaka stood there, victorious, but there was no happiness in her eyes. She had won the battle, but the war had left everyone broken. As John watched Mercy walk away, he knew he had lost more than just a bride. He had lost the trust, love, and future he had been working towards. Everything he had hidden, everything he had tried to leave behind, had come crashing down in a single day, and worst of all, on his wedding day. As Mercy disappeared from view, the wedding guests began to whisper and murmur. The tension in the air was palpable, and many were unsure what to do next. The once joyous occasion had turned into a nightmare that no one could have predicted. John stood motionless at the altar, his mind a whirlwind of emotions, anger, regret, guilt, and pain. He couldn't believe that Amaka had done this, but deep down, he knew it wasn't just her fault. He was the one who had lied. He was the one who had hidden the truth from Mercy. Amaka turned to face him, her expression a mix of triumph and bitterness. "You thought you could just forget about us? About your child?" Her voice was sharp, cutting through the silence. John looked at her, his heart heavy. "Amaka, I know I made a mistake. I know that. But this wasn't the way to fix things." Amaka crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "I didn't come here to fix anything, John. I came here to show you that you can't just erase the past. You owe me, and you owe our daughter, big time." The guests began to feel uncomfortable with the unfolding drama. John's mother, Mrs. Veronica, who had been seated in the front row, slowly approached the altar. She looked at her son with a mix of pity and disappointment. "John, how could you keep this from me?" she asked softly. "I thought I knew everything about you." John didn't have an answer. He couldn't explain why he had kept the truth hidden for so long. All he knew was that now, everything had fallen apart. Weeks passed, and the dust from the disastrous wedding began to settle. But John's life was far from calm. Amaka had filed a legal case for full custody of their child, and John was forced to confront a part of his life he had tried to forget. John sat in his lawyer's office, going over the details of the custody case. His lawyer, Mr. Gabriel, glanced over the paperwork. "You need to be prepared for a fight," Mr. Gabriel said. "Amaka has a strong case for full custody since you haven't been involved in your daughter's life." John sighed, running his hand through his hair. "I know I've made mistakes, but I want to be part of her life now. I just don't know if she will let me." Mr. Gabriel adjusted his glasses. "It's going to be difficult. She will argue that you abandoned them, and the fact that you didn't tell anyone about your daughter doesn't help. But if you're serious about being involved, we'll fight for joint custody. John nodded, determination filling him. He had lost Mercy, but he wasn't going to lose his child. He couldn't erase the past, but he could try to make up for it. Meanwhile, as Mercy distanced herself from John, she moved in with her friend Maria, trying to process everything that had happened. The love she had for John hadn't disappeared, but the trust was shattered. One evening, Mercy sat in her friend's living room, staring at her phone. She had dozens of missed calls and messages from John, but she couldn't bring herself to answer them. Her friend Maria sat beside her, offering a comforting presence. "What are you going to do about this whole issue, Mercy?" Maria asked gently. "Do you think you can forgive him?" Mercy sighed, her heart heavy. "I don't know. I love him, but how can I ever trust him again? He lied to me about something so important." Maria nodded in understanding. Trust is hard to rebuild, but it's not impossible. The question is, do you believe that John has truly changed? Mercy thought about it for a moment. She knew John wasn't a bad person, but the weight of his lies made her question everything they had built together. "I don't know," Mercy whispered. "I just don't know if we can ever go back to how things were." John, on the other hand, was determined to make things right. He knew that regaining Mercy's trust would take time, but he wasn't going to give up without a fight. He had hurt her, but he wasn't the same man who had made those mistakes. One afternoon, John decided to visit Mercy. He had thought long and hard about what he wanted to say and knew he couldn't leave things the way they were. When Mercy opened the door, she looked surprised to see him. "John, what are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you, Mercy," John said, his voice soft but firm. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you in ways I can't take back, but I need you to know that I love you. I've always loved you." Mercy crossed her arms, her expression guarded. "Love isn't enough, John. You lied to me. You hid a whole child from me." "I know," John said, taking a deep breath. "And I can't change the past. But I want to be better, not just for you, but for myself. I'm fighting for the custody of my daughter, and I want you to be part of the journey. I want us to be a family." Mercy's eyes softened, but her heart was still wary. "John, it's not that simple." "I know," John said, stepping closer to her. "But I'm willing to put in the work. I want to earn your trust back, even if it takes time. I don't want to lose you, Mercy." There was a long silence between them, the tension thick in the air. Finally, Mercy spoke. "I don't know if I can forgive you, John, but I'm willing to try." John's heart lifted, a glimmer of hope flickering in his chest. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was something, a start. Months passed, and slowly, John began to rebuild his life. He fought hard in court for joint custody of his daughter, and after a long and emotional battle, he was granted the right to be part of her life. Amaka, though still bitter about the past, began to accept that John wanted to be a good father. She saw that he was committed to their daughter and reluctantly allowed him to be involved. As for Mercy, she and John started to rebuild their relationship, one step at a time. The trust between them was fragile, but with time, it began to heal. Mercy wasn't ready to jump back into a full commitment, but she saw the changes in John and was willing to give him another chance. One day, as John sat on the beach watching his daughter play in the sand, he felt a sense of peace that he hadn't felt in a long time. Life hadn't gone the way he had planned. He had made mistakes, hurt people, and lost things he could never get back. But he had also learned, grown, and fought for the things that mattered. Mercy walked over and sat beside him, smiling softly as she watched the little girl play. "She looks just like you," she said quietly. John smiled, his heart full of love. "Yeah, she does." They sat in comfortable silence, the sound of the waves crashing gently in the background. It wasn't the perfect ending John had once imagined, but it was real, and sometimes, that was even better. The story teaches that while the past can come back to haunt us, it's never too late to take responsibility for our mistakes and try to make amends. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild, but with time, effort, and honesty, it's possible to move forward. True love is about growth, forgiveness, and the willingness to fight for the future, even when the past is full of pain. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another interesting story like this one. Share your thoughts on Amaka's shocking move, and stay tuned for more emotional and gripping tales that will keep you at the edge of your seat. Thank you so much for being part of African Stories with Jimmy. Till I see you again in my next video, goodbye.